The experience that we're going to talk about in this conversation is experiencing and navigating grief as Black gay men in our relationships. And so, someone who is very admirable and who has been very courageous in their journey is Anthony Antoine here to join us. Anthony Antoine, how are you?
Home in Atlanta. It's good to be home for a change, and it's good to be present to have this conversation.
First, thank you for sharing because talking about these things is not always easy, but we're going to get right into it. And so, first, let's talk about where you're from and what have some of your overall experiences with love. What have some of those been?
I'm from Newark, New Jersey. So I'm originally from Newark, but my home is Atlanta. I live here in Atlanta. And my experiences with love. What do I say about that? There's so much that I can say. I mean, as an aging Black gay man, I've been around the block. I've had some healthy relationships. And when I think about boyfriends or relationships, love, romantic relationships that I've been in, I'm a very committed and loyal person. The amount of boyfriends I've had in my life is probably on one hand. I mean, I've a 13-year relationship. And then my husband that I speak of so fondly, we were best friends first. We were in a 20-year relationship of best friends and then a 5-year romantic relationship and only married for a year and a half, which sometimes catches people off guard that I still speak of him in the way that I do, but we were best friends for so long and he was such a part of my life and still a part of my life, still a part of my life to this day. So when I reflect on love and relationships, I just think about loyalty and commitment, and that's what I require in a relationship as well.
So, let's talk about this 20-year journey. I know you called him husband.
Yes, he's my husband. He's still my favorite subject. A lot of times in my videos, I'll pull up my ring. So this is a ring, if I'm getting it right. This one right here is a ring he gave me 20 something years ago when we first met. And as I said, we were best friends first. And he was interested in my art and my music. And he had invested in one of my music projects and gave me a ring. I was with someone else. And so I took the ring and put it around my neck. And so if you look back on pictures from the time that I met him shortly thereafter, this ring has been around my neck for over 25 years. And then the second ring is one of our wedding bands, and I still wear our wedding bands because, as I said, we were married just before his diagnosis hit, so a year and a half before his diagnosis hit, and I still feel married. I made a commitment. He is the only person that I've ever wanted to marry, and I still feel that commitment still to this day, 6 years after his passing, and I'm still in a healthy relationship with him. Which for some people that becomes a little complicated, but yeah, we can talk about what that looks like. But I still feel married, even still to this day.
What was husband's name again?
Michael. Michael was his name. He's still my favorite subject. But Michael was extremely conservative. And that when I say conservative, meaning like conservative socially. So it was usually the quietest man in the room, always the smartest man in the room. You wouldn't always know that. He would sit back and watch and observe. And then it was at some point when the right time, he would strategically place it, and then he'll drop this mic of brilliance. And then you're like, whoa, what's going on over there? Like this quiet man is super smart, very kind and gentle, a loving person, but also complicated. And yeah, he was just a smart person, and that's what really attracted me to him. I don't know a lie he ever told me. So he was a man of his word, almost to a fault. So if he said he was going to do something, he would show up and do it. Even if you ended up in an argument with him, he still was a person that held true to his word. And that was such an admirable quality about him. And that was something that I easily fell in love with.
Over this 20-year friendship, what was it that occurred that let you both know it was worth exploring deeper?
We had made a take at exploring it deeper, and it just kind of didn't work out. It was awkward. I was still in love with my ex, and so it just didn't work out at first. But I can tell you when I knew that he was the one, and that he loved to travel to Brazil, and he had taken me to Brazil. And so we shared Brazil together. I've shared the story online. We got held up at gunpoint together. And in 2013, it was really right after we had decided to take our relationship to the next level. And I moved in. And days after I moved in, we were in Brazil and we got held up at gunpoint. And I kept asking, I was looking for a sign that would, let me know that I made the right decision. In my relationship, I call it God, whatever you call spiritually. I'm like, well, God, I didn't need it to be this, traumatic or this serious. But you can imagine being held up at gunpoint. He escaped and I fell 20 feet to concrete. And in that separation, I I kept saying to myself so confidently, so solidly, like, if Michael's okay, he's coming to get me. So I don't have to do anything. All I have to do is stay in this closet, stay hidden. And if Michael's okay, he's coming to get me. And after 20 minutes of saying, if Michael's okay, he's coming to get me, then it started to occur to me that maybe he's not okay.
Hmm.
And in those moments was when I knew. I started, my life flashing before me. My brother and I even joked earlier today, we landed on this conversation. I was bleeding. And so I wrote a message in blood to my daughter's Vogue. And I started believing that maybe something had happened to him. And long story short, he was able to escape. And when I got back to him, it was in those moments that I knew, like, I never want to leave his side. And that was October 16th, 2013. And it was that coming back together, being faced with the thought that maybe something had happened to him and I would lose him. And then that coming back together was clear, like, no, this is the one. Like, God, I didn't need it to be that extreme. I didn't need it to be that dramatic. But yeah, I know I made the right decision. Yeah. And
Thank
and
you for
and
sharing.
what I would say in that, what in that convinced me that I had made the right decision is that his every move during that ordeal was not about him. It was so selfless. So he barricaded the door. He made sure that I was safe. Like, every move was about me. Every move was about making sure that I was okay. And I don't know another love that is, yeah, I don't know a love like that. Like, he showed up as a person that loved me beyond, even more than himself.
And so you would say, even now, this has been obviously a love that you have never, or even before then, had never experienced before.
Never experienced. And I'm blessed in the love category. There's my ex who I used to call my soulmate, probably still is. The daughter of my mom, we were in a significant relationship and we're still friends. So I would call her my female soulmate and my male soulmate. And even beyond those two relationships, then life and God showed up with Michael, and that's beyond anything the love I've never known. So, which is why I still wear my rings and I'm still here.
You both lived in Atlanta together. And so what was your day-to-day like? What were the holidays and things like that? Paint a picture for us what that was like.
I miss him. He worked a lot, so he could work 50, 60 hours a week easily, sometimes be at work and then come home and work. And once I moved in, he was quite surprised that I was always home when he came home. For me, his love language was clearly acts of service. So he always came home. Like, if I said I wanted something to eat, well, he's going to come home with 3 meals. Or he's like, if there was a problem, he would swoop in to fix it. That was his way of just loving on me. And for me, where I feel like I made the difference for him, and it still carries through in who I am today. One of the things, he wanted a relationship. I was looking at him as a person that had access to knowledge, smarts, but also money. And I'm like, I didn't understand somebody having money, but being bored or being lonely or sad. And it's not that money fixes everything, but I'm like, money provides an access. And so where I added to his life in ways that I would plan the trips, and that would be everything for him. So here it is. I might not be able to afford to go to Chicago or afford to go to Brazil, but this man could. And he would like me because he was such in control at his job. He would want me to take control of that. So there were times where I would just like just leave it up to me. He didn't even know where we were going. When I would do things like that, that would just make him so happy because in his job he had to control so much. But then here at home, he has somebody that loves him enough to know the kinds of things that he wanted, and I would take control there. And so we just had we love music. He was a huge Prince fan. I'm a huge Prince fan too. You know, we connected on music and songs. He was a quiet artist writer. So taking an interest in my music, he would sometimes say, well, why don't you try this lyric? Or what about this? I didn't even know he had that because he was just a corporate, he worked at Coca-Cola for over 20 years. I knew him in that role, but then he had this quiet artist in him that sometimes would come out, and that's how we would connect. And I think that was where we connected and loved each other.
Do you remember any long-term plans that you two had together?
Absolutely. In losing my husband to cancer, which the diagnosis hit November of 2017. And the reason why I bring that up is because what Michael would plan and he put everything in a corner. We didn't know how it was going to go. So it was a serious diagnosis. We knew that things got serious really quick. He went from perfectly healthy to a stage 4 diagnosis within weeks, and his health was impacted. And I only wanted to fight for his life. Michael wanted to plan. He was a planner. He did strategic planning at Coca-Cola in life. He was just a by the book kind of person. And I mention that because in his planning, he would say, everything you need is in that corner. And I didn't want to focus on anything in that corner, but any paperwork, insurance, whatever it was, he would say, anything you need is in that corner. If this doesn't go the way we think it's going to go, everything you need is in that corner. And he did that as a way to do his own cancer journey and to make sure that I was going to be okay. And what he said is that in order for you to be okay, if this doesn't go the way we want it to go, I want you to lean on your family and your friends, and I want you to travel. Travel will save you. Go to the places that we love to go together, Brazil, South Africa, but then go to the places that we talked about going together. Iguazu Falls was one of the trips that we weren't able to take in that period of him being sick. And he said, go to the places that we talked about going. Iguazu Falls and Machu Picchu in Peru. We had talked about those two. We had talked about Giraffe Manor, which I just experienced a month ago, a couple of weeks ago. That was what we talked about. And he said, that will be your salvation. And I can tell you, I didn't think I was going to make it. I asked my last negotiation with God that I've ever made was in 2018 when he passed away. And I just asked for a year. I was like, God, just please give me a year because I thought I was going to die in weeks to a month.
And when you say you thought that you would die within a year, this was because the grief was so heavy.
The grief was so significant. Michael wanted to, and as many people do, very different from where I'm at now, but Michael wanted to pass away at home. So once he was moved into hospice care, we did home hospice care. And there are things about that last 2 weeks I've never spoken of because it was just that bad. It was that serious. And anyone who's ever been a caretaker or taken care of someone who's, had a terminal illness, it is tremendous. And for me, when he passed away, I thought I was dying too. It literally felt like I was dying too. That's what it felt like. And I was convinced that I was going out of here. So for me to wrestle with God and, I got up every day to keep trying. And I heard my husband's call for me to travel, and that would be my salvation. Lean on your family and friends and then travel. That will be your salvation. I got up to do that, but I just didn't see a way that that was going to save me. It didn't feel like that that was going to make the difference. And it did. Here I am 6 years later now. We're headed, July 11th will mark year 7.
How old was Michael when he passed?
Michael was 57, so way too young. And the thing that I would also say, and why I embrace, people will hear me say online how I'm retired. Doesn't mean that I don't do work or don't do the things that I love. I am retired. It's something that I embrace because it was something that Michael didn't embrace. He was able to retire from Coca-Cola at 55, and a lot of his identity was wrapped in his work for Coca-Cola and different people. He also worked on as a chair for Sheltering Arms and Organization. So he was just the most recent board chair. So he was committed to his efforts in community and his efforts at work. And I think in not being able to embrace retirement, which was such a big deal to me, I'm like, you're a Black man that can, like, you don't have to work. Like, you're 55 years old, you've paid your dues, you've invested your time, and you can now sit back and enjoy the rewards of your work and effort. And he just was never really that satisfied with his accomplishment. And so my saying that I'm retired is a way to celebrate um, his accomplishment. When he said everything I need is in that corner, everything I needed was in that corner, and my husband is still taking care of me still to this day. So, he did pass away at 55, but I honor him. I speak his name. I do interviews like this. I have these conversations. I still give gifts in his name
Mm.
because Michael isn't here to give them, but through me and through our love, through my love for him, um, that's how I honor him.
Let's go back to the diagnosis. You two have been living this life. You have been planning trips together and I'm sure looked forward to more than likely spending the rest of your life together.
Yes.
So what was this diagnosis like? Like, how did you know that he was sick and what was that experience like?
October 2017, we had gone to Jamaica together and landed there on my birthday. His birthday was October 17th. Mine is the 21st. So somewhere in between those 2 days, we traveled to Jamaica, landing there on my birthday the next day. And when we woke up, he was like, I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm not feeling well. So he had a little cough. He just was a little, slower than normal, just a little lethargic. And I was like, well, do you mind if like, it's my birthday. We had planned this outing and he allowed me to go out and, we were texting each other. So I left on my birthday, had a really good day. Somewhere in the exchange, he said he feels a little bit better and he was looking forward to me coming back to eat. But when we talked about it, it was like, oh, when we get back home, you need to get that cough checked out. Like, it's been lingering now for a couple of weeks.
Mhm.
And so that would have been my birthday, October 2017. November 10th, we got the first part of the diagnosis, which was, we know for sure that it's lung cancer because they found a spot on his lung. And then November 30th, they told us that it was stage 4 cancer all over his body. You can imagine, I mean, stage 4, hearing that, and if you know anything about cancer, that's a serious diagnosis. But the way that they told us was it is in his lungs, his liver, his lymph nodes, and there's a spot on his brain, but we're not going to worry about that right now. We're going to focus on his liver and his lungs. And so it was a serious diagnosis. And he went from perfectly healthy to not being able to drive, not being able to take care of himself in the space of weeks.
So when you two get the diagnosis, how did you both handle that news?
Within the space of a week, I understood that I had lost him. So by those first weeks in 2017, December 2017, we cried together that first night when we got home, and he was very quiet. He didn't say much of anything. I was looking to him to like give me more feedback on how he was feeling. He totally went inward and it became a spiritual battle for him. So I think a
Mm,
lot of it was just a quietness and he went into prayer and his relationship with God. That first night we cried together. That second night I went to cry and I kind of felt him like, petting me a little bit like, Third time I cried, it was clear, like, we're not doing it like this. Like, we're not going to be crying every day.
yeah.
And in that moment of like, we're not going to be crying every day, I understood that, I was on my own on my own. I had lost him, meaning he wasn't going to be able to be there for me in the way that I was going to continue to be there for him. Like he went inward and it was just a quiet spirituality, a relationship with God. And I think some of that was a protection for me. Because it hit me so hard, of course. It's not just him going through the diagnosis, but this is his diagnosis, but it impacted us. But I don't think he wanted me to lose myself. I think it was really important for him to do some separation so that I could hold on to life as best as I could.
So, as he dealt with this spiritual journey that he had to go on to prepare to transition, how did you take care of yourself emotionally? Because obviously you had to do that, and through those pats on the back, that was take care of yourself too. Where did you find your courage?
I reflect back and I think I could have done a better job of taking care of myself. All I wanted was to fight for his life. That's all I wanted. I wanted to fight for him. I would have done anything to save my husband. Um, he insisted on a couple of things. He insisted on me going to therapy, which
Mhm.
was a good call because that was very supportive through this process. He was already in therapy. At some point, he wasn't able to drive himself sometimes, so I would take him and then be sitting in the waiting area. And it's like, as another therapist here, it's like, no, why don't we be more strategic and plan for us both to be in therapy? Like, you need support for this. But then another thing that he insisted upon, which is, happened right up to the end, I love to play spades and I have a card crew. And so his thing was, I quickly stopped working to take care of him. And his thing was, yeah, you can stay home. And I didn't need his permission to stop working. Like I did that on my own. But once we realized I could jump on his insurance, then that made the difference. But for me, he didn't want me up under him. He was like, I'll holler if I need you. I can text you. I can call you. But you're not going to be sitting up under me all day, every day. Like, and so it was important for him that I kept my friendships, that I would still go out and play cards with my card crew, or still go to concerts, which I love. Or so those were some of the things that I was able to do in order to take care of myself. But really, my focus for 8 months and a day was him, my husband. I was fighting for his life.
What other ways were your friends able to support you too as you face this journey together, and were your families involved as well?
Absolutely. My family was the best. My daughter, my mom, my brother. So, I have a core unit of support. And then I have good friends that, I mean, I'm in relationships with, like, my best friend and I have known each other 30 something years. So, I have good people around me. And then, as I said, I quickly stopped working. I was working at Emory, had been in Emory University for 7 years, but there were friends that I didn't know very well, but knew and cared and loved and cared about me or knew our relationship. So people would show up at the door with groceries. My doctor, Dr. Melanie Thompson, who I used to work for, like she lived not far away, and her and Amy would like swing by. Like I would say, no, I don't need anything. I'm okay. It's like, well, it doesn't matter if you need anything. Like we're bringing a couple of bags of groceries just to lay eyes on you and just to give you a quick moment of relief. And if you need something, say something. But it was, people would show up in ways, something similar to what we talked about earlier, where there were friends that I thought I could count on that I couldn't, but
Yeah.
there were more people that, more friends that I could depend on, and more people that I didn't even know would show up. And that's what really got me through.
Anthony, let's get to the difficult part. When did you recognize that you were going to lose Michael?
Towards the end, the last couple of weeks were really, really rough. And as I said, he wanted to pass away at home. So we did home hospice care. And at some point, he stopped speaking and he stopped eating.
Mm,
And the stop speaking and stop eating was just so hard. And the home hospice nurse was there, and she said to me, I'm like, what am I supposed, like, I've never taken care of someone to this intimate. He's not speaking, he's not eating. And she said that he could be in this position for weeks to months. And I'm like, no, he can't. Like, because I couldn't understand, if he's not speaking, if he's not eating, how is he okay? And
mm,
that was just a bit much for me to take. And so I just talked to him and said that, I know I would speak to him because they would always say that hearing is the last of the senses to go. And so I knew that he could hear me. And I would speak to him and I just said, hey, I think we need help with this now. And I would do it as a collaboration, like we were making this decision together. And so I remember the day before he passed, I had that conversation like, I think we need help with this. I think we need to, we're at that point where we're now, this is too much for me to even do. Like, I didn't know it was going to be this significant. And he passed away the next day. I think what it was is that he heard me. He heard me say that I might be considering going into a facility or a hospital. And he was like, okay, Anthony's done everything he can do. It's time to go. And
yeah.
the very next day, like the lady told me, she was like, no, people are in this position. It could be like this for weeks to months. And I'm sitting there thinking, that's impossible. I'm not going to be able to do this for weeks to months. He's not eating. What do you mean weeks to months? And he passed away the next day, July 11th, 2018.
And when he passed, were you able to easily accept it, or how did you deal with that? What was facing that like?
I was able to easily accept it because he had been through so much pain and suffering.
Hmm.
And that to me wasn't my husband. I hated to see him suffer. And so the part that, and maybe people who have ever been a caretaker to someone with a terminal illness, what is hardly ever said out loud, and I try to say it out loud just to have people understand what that is. It was a relief. It was a relief that he was no longer suffering. It was a relief. And the light came into the room. So when you hear about people like going, like, I am clear, I call it God, but I was clear that he was with the light. Like, that's all, that's the only way that I can explain it. The light came into the room. He passed away in the evening. It was dark, but the light came and took Michael, and I was right there with him by his side. So that's the way I kind of explains it. So for me, it was a relief. It was, he's okay. I felt like, okay, he's no longer suffering. He's okay now.
Spiritually, do you still feel connected with him now?
Absolutely.
If
Absolutely. There are people, and I don't have to argue it with anyone. I don't need validation for it. There are ways that Michael has made it very clear to me that he's okay and that there is a life after death. I know it with all of my heart, all of my being. Michael and I used to joke about ways that we might. Um, I think we both believed in life after death, but his was more, is more intellectually, he would just be dismissive, like, you don't get to show up or you don't get to send signals to people that you've left behind. But he did believe in life after death. Michael has showed up in so many ways that I don't need validation about that there's life after death. I know it with all of my being. And he has let me know in tremendous ways that he's still connected to me and he's okay.
So once he passed, and I'm sure even though you were prepared for it and had found the courage to face the reality of his passing, what was adjusting to life like without him?
There are times that adjusting to life without him is still adjusting, still to this day, 6 years later. I just lost two people very close to me. And it's so triggering. It is so triggering. It takes me right back to losing Michael. So I lost my aunt who had Alzheimer's, dementia, and had been sick for, a few years in there. And then I lost a good friend of mine of 30 years, Burl. He passed away suddenly and died of a heart attack. And anytime that I'm faced with either, being so close to losing people, death, having to engage with either a funeral or support to family, it takes me right back to Michael. And so I'm really in a period right now of just even adjusting to how many emotions come back, not wanting to, how difficult funerals can be and how traumatic that can be on my emotional and physical well-being. Um, I'm a huge believer in do for me while I'm alive. So, for example, if it wasn't for my mom, my brother, my daughter, Michael's funeral would have never happened because
Mm.
I felt like I did everything I was supposed to do while he was alive. And he was so strategic and clear about so many instructions to make sure that I was okay, but left no instructions around the funeral, which told me that it wasn't that important to him. And so I'm like, hey, if we need a funeral, if people need to grieve, if that's a way that we need to grieve, like we can do that. But the truth of it is, um, I'm all about showing up for people when they're alive. Give people their flowers when they're alive, love on people when they're alive. Funeral is for who's left behind. It's not for the person that's, gone on, passed on. So it's very triggering when I have to engage with funerals now. It's almost to the point where I'm like, now I don't even know. Like I told my family, I have no desire for a funeral.
Yeah.
The funeral is for you. So they're like, well, what would be your wishes? As a family and friends, we start talking about it. That's for y'all. So if y'all want to do one, cool. But I don't have any desires. My brother interceded and said that, oh, yeah, I know what we do for Anthony. What we do is we get together and we say that we're going to go on a trip in his honor. You want to honor me? That would be a great way to honor me.
Go on a trip.
Go on a trip because traveling is so important to me and such an important part of my survival. So if you want to honor me, that's how you honor me. But funerals are just so, it just it's so triggering. It's very emotional and it's not healthy for me.
When we talk about this experience, it's obviously a very impactful experience to have someone who you consider a soulmate, someone who was very significant to your life transition and have to find the courage to continue on. It leaves you with a lesson or a gift. And so for you, what have been those lessons or gifts?
Even in the darkness, there's light. So whenever you're in the darkness, look towards the light. And what I mean by that is whether it's the person bringing by groceries or you see a pretty flower, be able to smile at that flower, looking at the color purple, that saying about, I think it pisses God off to walk past the color purple and not, acknowledge it. I wholeheartedly believe that even in darkness, there's light. So friendships, a nice text message, and then for me to also move within the intention that when others are in darkness, be the light.
Mhm.
So that is really the lesson for me. Like the hope is that we're all supporting each other in making it through this crazy life, making it through this crazy world. What you were speaking about earlier, I'm so big on like supporting my brothers. I love to see people like my friends. I love to see my friends win, and I
Yeah.
want to be a part of you winning. You know what I'm saying? So I love like I celebrate when others, and that also becomes a part of the light in darkness. So when in darkness, look to the light. When others are in darkness, be the light.
Do you think you would ever be able to move forward into another relationship?
I will never marry again. And that still holds true 6 years later. That's a promise I made to him. He didn't need that from me. He was clear that If our chapter is ending, he wanted me to live a full life and plotted and strategized for ways for me to be okay, for me to have a full life, and encouraged that, wanted that for me. Michael is the only person I will marry. I still feel married to him. I don't often speak of him as my late husband, only sometimes with people I don't know who don't know enough of the story just for clarity. But he's a very real relationship in my life.
When you talk about it to people that you do date now, are they intimidated by it? You know, what is that dynamic like?
I have told this story once or twice, and it's kind of funny, but he got it. The guy that not my two boyfriends. This is just like someone I'm on a date with. They're trying to get to know me. I'm getting to know them. Um, Intimidated or whatever they felt about like how I honor my husband. Sometimes that can make people uncomfortable. And so, we were in that conversation and he was asking me, if we were to get serious, what would it look like? And what place would Michael have in my life? And so he just didn't understand why years later I was still honoring Michael in the way that I was. And I broke it down to him and I said, Michael just paid for our meal.
Okay.
And he said, oh, now what you gonna say?
Yeah, there's nothing to say. Just eat the French fries.
Eat the French fries, boo. Michael paid for those.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And there's a clarity in that. Like I don't know too many, and I'm in just a very privileged, a different position. I stand on those privileges. Michael is still loving the hell out of me. And you know what I mean? He passed away 6 years later, and Michael just took me to Giraffe Manor. That was a dream of ours. Like we had talked about it, and it, just never really happened. And we had talked about it for 10 years. I wanted to do Giraffe Manor by myself, with Michael. So it really felt like, in my head, in my spiritual thinking, like Michael, we're finally going to Giraffe Manor. And to spend that night there, the dinner, candlelit, like I'm on a date with my husband. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And so that's really important for me. Like, and the person that I would, if I, the two people that I've dated seriously in the 6 years, had some understanding of what Michael was to me, and it didn't make a difference, or they could respect that. But it would take a really special person to be in my life and to date me because Michael ain't going nowhere. And so I am still loving my husband still to this day because that is a man I made a promise to, and I will love him until the day that I die.
What is it about losing a partner that some people will not understand until it happens to them?
Thankfully, I've lived a life poured into community where community was able to be there for me.
Hmm.
If you haven't put in that work, then I imagine that to be a very lonely road. And I know that for a few people have looked to me to be supportive during their transitions, other people who have lost their spouses. But because I've poured into community, I didn't feel invalidated. I didn't feel like there wasn't a support to recognize my relationship.
Mm.
That's about a life that I've lived over, now, 20 something years in Atlanta, being involved in the LGBT community, being an activist and a poet and engaging in community in ways that my love for Michael was honored and supported. And I really have seen other people not have that love and support, but that's about, the life that they haven't, the ways in which they haven't poured into community. But some of that is about the way that you live. Like, because I have lived a life pouring into community, at this time, community supported and honored my relationship with Michael. And that was hugely important to learn. And the difference is where some people don't have that support. And I know that that happens.
For anyone who may know someone who has lost a partner, how would you encourage them to show up and be supportive of someone? What are the most, effective ways to show up and support someone, to be a friend, a good neighbor, good family member?
One of the things I could not stand going through it was, God don't put nothing on you more than you can bear. And I'm like, no, this is more than I can bear. And I used to hate hearing that. So I would just say honor that everybody's process of grief is different, and really being present to be able to ask, what do you need? How can I be of a support to you? And that might look different for me asking me than asking the next person. And really just being willing to be present for whatever that might be. I think I mentioned Melanie and Amy, I a lot of times wouldn't ask for anything. And so they knew that I was that person. So then they would just show up. Like
Mhm.
sometimes it's just being a little intrusive in just showing up with groceries at my door. They knew where I lived, not accepting no for an answer. We just want to lay eyes on you, make sure you got some food in the house, and remind you to take care of yourself too. Um, I think that's a huge one. Shortly after I lost Michael, another friend lost their husband. And I reminded the question that you asked earlier, Samson, how did you take care of yourself? I didn't remember to take care of myself during that period, and that had some impact. So, just as a reminder, I just lost my aunt. So with my cousin, her daughter, every so often on the phone calls these past couple of weeks, I'm like, have you taken a moment to slow down just to take care of yourself, Loretta? You
Yeah.
know, just to breathe today, or what is it that you're going to do today or tomorrow, even if it's 10 minutes, to just take care of yourself. So sometimes we need that reminder when you're going through that, because it's very easy to lose yourself when you love someone so much and you want to fight for someone's life. Sometimes you just got to remind people to just slow down and take care of yourself.
Last question. Words of advice or encouragement for anyone who may be experiencing this right now?
When in the darkness, look to the light, and just know that there is a support system out there for you. You have to find it.
Mhm.
But the hope is that you've already cultivated a support system so that they can be there for you. So I'm big about this, like live your life with that intention. I tell people if anything happens to me, like if I were, I've told my mom, my brother, my daughter, there'll be 10 other people in that line trying to fight to take care of Anthony because of the life that I've lived. And
Yeah.
that just means, try to cultivate friendships now, not just when you need them.